Call this meeting of the Boothbay Selectmen to order. First up is Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excuse me. First up, public hearings. The first one is the Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens, located at 132 Botanical Gardens Drive, Boothbay, map R4, lot 109, to construct a pier system with an 8 by 36 angled access boardwalk, a 90-foot fixed pier, 8 foot in width for the first 78 feet and 12 feet wide for the last 12, to a seasonal 40-foot by 4-foot runway to two 12-foot by 20-foot floats supported by dolphins. The project includes an osprey platform located on the back river. Jim?
We have the full application. The planning board has already met and approved their portion. You have in your packets a letter from Peter Ripley, our harbor master, stating that there was an on-site public hearing. He has not received any objections, oral or written, and it's his opinion that the project does not interfere with navigation.
Jim, you said that he states that there's no interference with navigation. What about the injury to the rights of the others? Those are the two criteria that we look at: navigation and injury to the rights of others.
I think his statement that he's received no objections, written or oral, is what he was trying to surmise, that he doesn't see any injuries because nobody has voiced any displeasure with the project.
Can I speak to that? Just so you know, I'm Laura Sacco and I did the permit for them, and they are 3,416 feet to their south of Butter and 734 feet to the north of Butter. So they have lots of land.
With the selectmen, the injuries to the rights of others don't mean the abutters. It means clammers, folks like that. We deal with out on the water.
Right.
The planning board deals with the land. If there isn't anything wrong with it, I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Motion passes. Just one signature. Next up is Michael D. and Jennifer K. Gagnon, map U4, lots 19 and 29, located at 3 Salter Lane and Wall Street, Boothbay, Maine, to construct a pier system consisting of 6-foot by 4-foot flat section, a 38 by 4-foot slope section, and a 30-foot by 4-foot flat section with a 40-foot by 3-foot runway and a 10-foot by 20-foot float. In addition, stairs to the fixed pier will consist of a 4x4 landing, a set of 42-inch wide stairs to a 7-foot by 4-foot interim landing, and another 42-inch wide stairs to the fixed pier located on Lincoln Bay. Jim?
These were advertised before we put together your information packets. So I handed out the letter that Pete Ripley, our harbor master, has put together for the next two public hearings. But they're very similar, as there was an on-site public hearing in which, let's see, we're doing Gagnon, Douglas was the selectman there, and Peter was there, and there are no objections, oral or written, and it's Pete's opinion that it does not interfere with navigation. If you're so inclined to approve this one, if you could give me signature rights. I don't have the application in front of me. I don't want to slow up.
And allow Jim to sign on the selectman's behalf.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any more discussion?
While we're in discussion, can we also solicit discussion from the audience where it is a public hearing?
Oh, yeah. Is there any discussion from the audience? There being none. All in favor? Opposed? Next up is Gregory and Cynthia Holton, map R2, lots 10-1, located at 830 Back River Road, Boothbay, Maine, to construct a pier system consisting of a pressure-treated wood 4-foot by 20-foot and 4-foot by 20-foot access stairs, pressure-treated wood 6-foot by 10-foot pier, 3-foot by 40-foot pressure-treated wood or aluminum ramp, and a pressure-treated wood 10-foot by 20-foot float with a 1-foot by 4-foot hinge step and a pressure-treated wood or aluminum 3-foot by 3-foot attached boat stabilizing frame located on Back River. Jim?
Same things apply to this application as well. There is a letter that I handed out just now from Peter Ripley, our harbor master, saying that he has received no objections, oral or written, and it's his opinion that the project will not interfere with navigation. One other thing that we'll point out, since we have quite an audience, we've made these wars and weirs applications seem almost effortless when we get to this point, but that's because the permitting agents, the code enforcement, the harbor master, the selectmen that go to the public hearings on site have all done a lot of work to get it to this point. I don't want that to be unnoticed.
Chuck, on the first one, you would mention about we're responsible for, how did you term that?
We're responsible for looking at both navigation and injury to the rights of others. Others meaning on the water,
Right.
clammers, lobstermen, fishermen, etc. So I think
Would it
it's
hurt?
great that Pete gives us these, and he weighs in on navigation, but I'd like to see him weigh in the future on
That's
the
what I was,
other as well.
right, that's what I was getting at. If he could put that in each one of his letters each time, that would make it.
I think that's his intent by saying he's received no objections, and Pete's not shy to be vocal. If he had objection on behalf of the town, it would be in the letter. So I'm surmising his letter to say that he's not aware of any injuries at this point. But I mean, obviously,
It would be better just to have it covered, and I understand what you're saying about but receiving no objections is different than making sure that we're covered on both criteria.
certainly.
Any comment from the audience?
I'm Greg Bolton. I just wanted to point out that there was a late amendment to this application filed Monday afternoon to add a haul-out ramp. The original application was for year-round, living the floating water year-round, and now it's been changed to seasonal with the addition of a haul-out ramp.
That was DEP recommendation, though, right?
Yes, it was.
That doesn't change our approval.
It doesn't factor in on the two criteria that you're looking at, the rights of others or navigation. The code enforcement officer and the permanent agent are aware of it. I think you were aware of it that day. And it's a DEP recommendation, so we always get behind the DEP recommendations.
It's a DEP recommendation, but wouldn't you have to go back to the planning board for an amendment if you've already been to the planning board?
The planning board hasn't seen this application yet.
They haven't,
We'll
okay.
see it on the 18th of September.
And that is a little bit confusing to everybody outside of this meeting area, is that we've tried to streamline the process. So sometimes the planning board sees the application before the selectmen, and sometimes it's vice versa, and it really just depends on when the application's received.
So should we approve this on contingent of it, or that it won't matter, they won't get it?
The motion should be amended to include his hollow.
Okay. With the amendment of the hollow.
There's no
Motion's been made and seconded to approve Gregory and Cynthia Holton with the one amendment. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Pass.
Who seconded that?
I did.
Now, did you also, in that, allow, did Jim need to sign that one?
No, that was the
You-
second one, wasn't
And
it?
both of them.
He needs to
Second
sign
and
this
third.
one too, I
Yeah.
think. Was that part of that motion, or do you?
Unless anybody has a problem with that. Next up is Laura Francis from the Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens, liquor license premises premise extension request.
So I'll open that discussion because we've started this. You have a letter in your packet from Laura in the Botanical Gardens. We spoke briefly just last week, and I think she spoke with Bonnie prior to that. Some upcoming events are not necessarily covered within their liquor license that is already approved. When Bonnie and Laura asked for advice from the state licensing on how they would go about getting this approved, they said that the selectmen could authorize an expansion of that area that's covered under the license, but they'd want a letter stating that the selectmen do so indeed allow that. So Laura's put together this letter. Anything that you could say that?
Not really, other than to try and simplify it. There is a reception for members that's being done by the membership committee or the membership office itself. It's an annual reception. It is a cash bar that is inside the building at the Botanical Gardens. They want the members to be able to take their purchased drink and walk to, you have your maps there, and walk out of the main building onto the great lawn right in front. And also they're going to take a tour over to the Lerner Garden, which when you go in the building and you're looking off to the left, it's just right there. So they want them to be able to walk around. We're not licensed without a permit to carry alcohol around the property. So what we do is state the property no alcohol beyond this point. So at the end of and then we have staff there that sort of, support that. And so, but basically the state suggested that we get a letter for requesting a permit for the extension of our premise.
For one day or forever?
It's just for that one day. And so I submit that letter to the state. You have to approve the letter that I submit to the state, and you also in turn have to write pretty much the very same letter. So I can pick that up and take it to the state as well.
How did it end up getting as restricted
I
as it
have
is?
absolutely
Because
no
with the
idea.
nature of the garden, wouldn't you want to walk
Yeah,
around if
and
you
we
were?
can't, we're not licensed to have alcohol throughout the entire property, which is kind of silly, but we're not, the only way we could do it would be to license each individual garden at $900 per year. So that'd be like times, 10 or whatever, yeah. So every time we have an event, and all of our events through the summer, they have a cocktail reception in an area that we're licensed for, but then they have a tent put up in the event lawn or down in the education building. That's why we have to get a separate license to cover that area to serve the alcohol. And with that said, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. With that said, we bring in a deputy for every event, and just make sure that nothing's violated and that things, but it's a requirement of the state. So basically, what we're asking you to do is to approve the letter that I've put together there, and then for Jim to put together pretty much the same kind of letter. And then I take it to the state and they approve it. They're not charging us for the fee, they're not giving, they're not charging us any extra for it like they normally do. So it doesn't make much sense, but that's what we wanted to do.
I think since it's a one-day event that we support.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a one-time,
I mean, even if it wasn't.
I know. It just doesn't make sense that we can't walk around. But that's okay, we'll bear with it.
I'll make a motion to authorize Jim to write a letter to the state stating our support for this.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Please vote.
Between
Now stop.
between you and I and Bonnie,
Yeah,
we'll figure it out.
just put it together. You can use my letter, you just use pieces from it, and use the same words.
Okay.
Basically,
Excellent.
thanks.
Hey, does anyone have a problem that, just in case there's people here that want to speak to us, we move public comment before Bob comments? That way they wouldn't have to stay here for the rest, you know what I mean?
Well, we can get.
We're just gonna move the first public up ahead of you, that's all. Yeah, we still have two anyways. So.
No, so we can just limit the bar to 2.5 minutes.
So public comment, does anybody have anything? I guess that made it easy.
That didn't
Okay.
make it easy, did it?
Next up is Bob Fox from Lincoln County Planner about the sea level rise project.
Hi, I couldn't be here. We are just about done with this project. We have two more towns left to present for Mohegan and Waldeboro. What I'm going to start out, as soon as the projector warms up, is a very short PowerPoint just to remind you where we were. About a year ago, a little over a year ago, when we started this project. It's
Frank, would you mind getting that light switch right behind you on the wall? Just down at the corner. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Frank.
Because of the public hearing for the zoning ordinance changes, we had limited setup time, so thank you, Bob, for being patient with us.
okay. We would not be able to have done this project a couple years ago. And the reason we were able to do this is because the federal government just completed a LiDAR topographic survey of all of Lincoln County, including all of Boothbay. Now, if you're familiar with the old green USGS topographic maps, those had a 10-foot contour in them. In other words, every line you saw on that green map showed a 10-foot change in elevation. Well, these new LiDAR maps are a 2-foot contour, which is basically as good as almost any topographic survey that you could hire a surveyor to do if you're doing a site plan for a site. And in fact, they're accurate to within 1 foot. So that allowed us the accuracy to do this project. The county applied for a grant from NOAA, and the county commissioners provided much of the match. Part of the grant, we retained the Maine Geological Survey scientists there to do all the technical aspects of the work, and that's what we're reading tonight. So just to start out quickly with this. By the way, everything I show you tonight's on our website in exactly the same format. So we're using Google Earth as the base. Everything, all the sea level rise scenarios are on Google Earth. And we're Google Earth on our website. And if you don't have it now, it's a very easy download, and it's a very useful program. But as I scoot around Boothbay, you can do exactly the same thing scooting around your area, your neighborhood, if you like. So, this is a graph of the readings of the Portland tidal gauge. We have 100 years of readings, so that's good data. And so over the last 100 years, the sea level has increased 7.3 inches. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, but in fact, if you own waterfront property, and I've heard a lot of property owners, it can be significant. However, the real issue is the last 20 years, that increase in sea level, the rate of increase has been going up. And that's been really the major concern. Now, these are just straight mathematics. If we're not talking about climate change, tonight we're talking about sea level rise, but just based on current conditions, if the Antarctic and Greenland ice sheet melting rates continue for the next 40 years, as they are today, the cumulative loss would be another almost 6 inches. When this is added to predicted sea level contribution of 3.1 inches from melting glacial ice caps and 3.5 inches from ocean thermal expansion. As the ocean gets warmer, it expands. It's just simple physics. Sea level could go up by 12.6 inches by the year 2050. So keep that in mind. That's a foot in 40 years. And that's just straight math. And I'll say that it is possible in the next 30 or 40 years that this may turn around for whatever reason. All we can deal with is the way it's going now and kind of plan for that. Okay, so when we undertook this project, we decided, well, we want to do some scenarios. We want to say, well, what if it goes up this far? What if it goes up this far? What would be the impact on roads or public buildings or private buildings? So we decided we're going to pick some scenarios. And the scientists up at the Maine Geological Survey did a lot of research and came up with, generally, scientists throughout the world feel that the most likely scenario for increases would be 2 feet to 6 feet. 2 feet being optimistic, 6 feet being very pessimistic. So we decided to bracket that. But then, in an abundance of caution, what we also decided to do, but let's just assume 1 foot. That's a 1 foot increase in 100 years. All this is a 100-year scenario, so it's not like anything at sea level, except for a storm, is of imminent problem to us. Sea level rise goes up, sea level goes up gradually. So what we did is we did these 4 scenarios. A 1 foot increase in 100 years, 2 foot, 3 foot, and 6 foot. So then we had to decide how we were going to measure that against. Now, so what we decided is because we had this new LiDAR data, we were able to much more accurately determine the highest annual tide. So we looked at what would happen if any of those scenarios were added to the highest annual tide, that once a year highest tide. Then the other scenario we took was the storm of record for Lincoln County. That's a February '78 storm that a lot of folks remember that had a 3.5 foot tidal surge. So that storm, we said, okay, what would happen if we had that storm again, and we had a 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, or 6 foot increase in sea level? That's the way we did it. I'd like to point out, Boothbay had one of the CEOs at the FEMA floodplain map session a couple of weeks ago. And very interestingly, while we took the '78 storm record, FEMA, through its calculations, however it did it, they determined it's their own 100-year storm, which they call the 1% storm. And it turns out that their calculations for their storm that they used for the flood maps is almost identical to our 1978 storm. So that's good. It eliminates a little bit of confusion. Okay, so as I said before, a project used recently acquired LiDAR topographic data. And by the way, you or your surveyors can hire a surveyor, or if you have work at the industrial park, your surveyor can download that topographic data free of charge. It's available on the state website. So we did that, and we did the 4 scenarios. And originally, this is the way, when I came here a year ago, I said, okay, this is what we're going to evaluate. We have this LiDAR, and these changes in colors represent changes in elevation. And we have digital information on infrastructure. That is, we know digitally exactly where roads are, or certain public buildings are, because those are in data layers of the state. So it's pretty easy in order to evaluate, well, what buildings are going to be affected, what public buildings or what roads are going to be affected under various scenarios, as I'll show you in a couple of minutes. What we didn't have in Lincoln County is a buildings layer. In other words, we did not know where private structures were in the shoreline zone, digitally. I mean, you could look at a map and say, they're there, but electronically we didn't know. We had an opportunity early this year where we found a contractor who was able to take, using the LiDAR data, digitally locate all the buildings within 300 feet of the highest annual tide line. So we have that. And so now tonight, as I'll show you, we can tell you which buildings would be affected. Just to give you an idea, now this kind of, this is a very flat area in York County. And so our coast, except for some areas like up in Edgecombe, we don't have this kind of coast. But just to show you what the impact of sea level rise could be, we took this area. So this is existing conditions. This dark blue is open water. This medium blue is low marsh, inundated regularly. This light blue is high marsh, and the highest extent of the high marsh is the highest annual tide. That's it today. So what would happen if you added 2 feet of sea level rise on the same area? A lot of this low marsh gets converted to open water. A lot of the high marsh gets converted to low marsh, which means it's irrigated more often. And then this high marsh moves up and upland to some extent. And then the highest extent of the high marsh should be the highest annual tide line. So you see the difference. We have very few areas that will have that dramatic change, just to give you an idea of how it works. Another thing we did, this was done in a bunker, and at the time they did it a little differently. They have to do it with better data. This is called an inundation analysis. The scenarios I'm going to show you where the water extends to. It doesn't show you the peak. But what you can do, if the town has concerns, we can actually identify this. Using this technique, we can say how deep the water is in a road. So the fire department knows they're going to be 2 feet on 96, East Boothbay, for example. Now this was kind of gross because it was, these different colors represent a 2 foot change in depth. The technology changed a bit, so now we can do 1 foot. And we picked the Samoset area, and we picked Route 96 East Boothbay area. And I've got slides to show you those. Again, everything's on the website. Finally, next steps. If towns specifically ask us to, we will assist them in updating ordinances to address sea level rise if they want. We'll also help towns in planning for improvements to infrastructure potentially impacted by sea level rise. We will also work with communities to identify potential funding sources for those infrastructure improvements that may be warranted. And finally, what we want to do is identify funding sources for subsequent project phases. What we did is what they call a bathtub model. It doesn't include wave action, for example, because wave action is very complicated because we have very complicated underwater topography, and we're looking for countries to see if we can model that. So again, this is a bathtub model. It also doesn't include rainfall associated with the storm, than the rainfall we may have gotten in the 78 storm record. So, with that said, we're going to scoot right to the scenarios. This is Google Earth, and this is exactly what you would see on your screen, and you'll be able to do exactly what I'm doing. So, and it's really easy to use once you get a little bit of the hang of it. Google Earth, for whatever reason, likes to tilt this stuff, so you always have to tilt the colors. Okay, so you all know where this is. So, one thing you're going to see, by the way, well, let's just show you what this is. This is the highest annual tide line. There it is right there. That's the new once a year line, highest annual tide. When you see a building highlighted, as you see these buildings here, a building highlighted means that there is water at the foundation. It could be a quarter of an inch of water, it could be more. That's all it means. And the way we did it is that, let's see, I guess we don't have it. The second thing we have here is you see, on the website we don't have this because it just got confusing. But if we have a parcel where the water line extends to the center of the parcel, it's highlighted. And I couldn't turn it off here, but the way it works, when it's highlighted, we have a booking page. If the town wants that information, we give it to them, but it just got kind of complicated. Okay, so that's the highest annual tide line. Let's take off those parcels. And this is the highest annual tide plus 0.3 meters, which is 1 foot. So, if we have a 1 foot increase in sea level, drop off those parcels again. These are the buildings, a couple more buildings got affected. But the key is right here. You see this dark line. Dark line means there's roads in here. It has water in the road. And if you click on a black dot area, So that's mostly for the public officials know where they're at. Now, in almost all cases, an inundated road, let's scoot into the sea. See what's inundated? The water crossing. In almost all cases, if it's inundated, the black line shows up. There's a couple of glitches, I noticed in one or two areas, I don't recall if it's in Boothbay, it doesn't show. By the way, here was the highest annual tide line. Here's the highest annual tide line, the new one, with 1 foot increase in sea level. Doesn't look like there's any other areas down here, but let's add one more foot to the highest annual tide line. That drop off parcels, big parcels are down in your plan, right, on the website. You see what happened here. The area of inundation actually extends quite a bit more. And you're all familiar with that column there. There's no surprise. So let's drop that off. Take all these off. And let's go to the 100-year storm. This is the 78 storm record. And you see here, I don't know if anyone around here is familiar with what happened to that storm record. The road I'm sure got inundated. We have another road that just got up, that's Lincoln Street. So the head of Lincoln Street now just got water on it. And down here, we've got, a pothole and over here, curb road. Now, a lot of this is something that your EMA might find useful. And I'll explain the program we're working on now to help them a little bit more. So that's a 100-year storm today, without any increase. If we take that 100-year storm, that's 0.3 meters. You see what happened here. This has gotten bigger. We've actually, I think this is last year. We picked up another road here, which, Murray Hill Road, I don't know if there's another way out. So they want to, emergency service may want to run that. And I would just add, stop me if you have any questions. So remember early on I said that was a 12.6-inch increase in 40 years, just on calculating current conditions out for 40 years. So that's about 2 feet, roughly. And that is equivalent to 2 feet in 100 years. So that would be this right here. Oops, down, 100-year storm, 0.6 meters, that's 2 feet. So it's fairly likely during a significant storm event, this is what would be wet down there. And I'm not going to get any more conservative. You can do that at home, just to show you. So let's scoot down. You've got actually four impact areas in Boothbay. So I'm going to drop all these off. Let's go to the Samoset area. Okay, highest annual tide only, and we've got this road here, which is Samoset Trail. If we add foot, well, there's 2 inundation areas in Samoset Trail. I don't think there's any more down here. Let's just go right to highest annual tide plus 2 feet, which is well within likely scenario. You see the problem areas right before. Let's take that off and let's just take the storm. Let's go right to the 100-year storm without any increase in sea level. That's instructive. That's a 100-year storm. And your emergency response personnel will be very interested in that probably. And let's just add 2 feet of sea level rise to that. Well within the likely scenario. And now we'll get that area. third impact area is Ocean Point. Okay. There is no issue with high standing tires, I recall, but let's add 1 foot to high standing tire. And no issues. Again, these parcels are highlighted simply because the water is separate. Add a foot. Huh? Yes, it issues to the parcels, but not the buildings on the parcels, unless the building is highlighted. So high standing tide plus 2 feet. And we have some issues down here. You see how far the water stands, and here's buildings. There's got water at the foundation. Switching over to the storm, 100-year storm. What's the problem there? So part of this is your capital improvement plan, that you're doing the capital improvement, with the comprehensive plan. Long-term capital improvements made, when work needs to be done in Ocean Point Road, you may take this into consideration, bigger culverts, elevate the road, what have you. But that is highest, that is the storm record only. If we add 2 feet to the storm record, which is 0.6 meters, we end up with some additional areas. First Street, and so forth. Now, this is a storm condition, so after the storm, it drains. Okay? Just keep in mind, we're not talking about permanent inundation. The last impact area is in West Boothbay. Scoot over there. Check out that nice new bridge. Okay. I think there's only one highest annual tide impact area. No, there is not. Okay. Highest annual tide plus 1 foot. Got over here, see that black? Pine Island Road. And Sawyer's, let's see, bridge, is that? By the way, this Google Earth, the way this program was, the way the LiDAR was done, is to drop out bridges. So if you have a bridge, the bridge itself is not included. This says nothing about whether the bridge is indicated. The run up to the bridge, the area of fill, before you get to the actual span, is included, as you'll see. So let's add, let's go highest annual tide plus 2 feet like we had before. And here, we got, slow down. Sawyer's Island Road. And it's a good example. The span here is dropped out, but the run up is in, so that gets one. And if you go up around a little bit more, I guess that's it. That's the only area, only couple of areas on Island Road. And I'm almost done. What we'll do next is storm of record. An island is just the storm record with Sawyer's Island Road and it does include all private roads. We'll look at this a little bit more closely. The way we got it. Let's go right to adding 2 feet to the 100-year storm. per storm plus 2 feet. An additional impact area in the Lake Drive. Over here, we've got, I haven't really concentrated on it, but you see buildings that got water at the foundation. Here is East Side Road. Let's go to the bridge. Both sides. Storm conditions on the Pineapple Road. And down here, again, we got some drop down. So, those are scenarios, you can play with those at home. The additional information I can give you, by the way, if you want to see what Boothbay Harbor looks like, just let me know. These are these are on the website also. And these are depths. So what you see on these slides, an inundation rather than a dark black line this is highlighted gray line. So you can see this road under highest annual tide limit. Highest annual tide plus 0.3. You can see it extends here, some more, and down here. And what this means is, this is color coded so that right here, this tells you the depth. See that red next to that? That means the depth there is between 0 and 1 foot. So you look at the color immediately adjacent to the impacted road, and it tells you what the depth is. So let's just switch over to storm of record. You see over here, this is, that's 1 to 2, 2 to 3 feet there. There is, that's significant. That looks like 4 to 5 feet depth. And that's too deep for a fire truck. That's where that is valued. And then if you go down to this area, which is East Boothbay, and right here, with the highest annual tide plus 1 foot, it looks like there's about 1 foot of water. That looks orange to me. Or maybe that's right. You see, that's orange. And you see the depths down here also. So that's the value of that. You see how deep it gets here. This 100-year storm plus 3 feet is significant. I'll be showing this slide to DOT in a couple of weeks when we have a meeting, because this is their road. Okay, I'm almost done. The next thing I'll show you is what we did. We looked at all the roads that impacted by scenario. The highest annual tide, 100-year storm. So, at the highest annual tide, Samoset Trail has water. And if you go down, if you add a foot, if we had highest annual tide plus 1 foot of sea level rise, you've got Samoset Trail, 2 more impact areas plus Route 96. And Sawyer's Island Road comes in at 2 feet and so forth. So it gives you an idea of what roads can impact highest annual tide plus 3 feet. All these roads are hit with water. The storm of record, which is right here, that's a fairly significant list of roads. That's just the storm of record only, and 1 foot of sea level rise, those roads come in, 2 feet, those come in. And the last thing I have that is not on the website now, but will be on tomorrow. These are the elevations in Boothbay for each one of these scenarios. So in other words, right now, the highest annual tide in Boothbay would be 6.7 feet. And it goes up from there. The elevation of the 100-year storm of record is 9.6 feet in Boothbay. So if you were going to decide you want to raise a road, when it's time to reconstruct, your surveyor can take this data and you say, look, we want that to pass the storm of record and if sea level, with a 2-foot increase in sea level rise, your surveyor will take that data and be able to shoot the elevation and tell you what the surface of that road has to be. So that's what we got. And the final thing I'll say is that we've got some areas in the county that are of significant concern. And what we've decided to do is we're looking for some federal funding. And you just don't get federal funding to do things. You have to, if you want federal funding to investigate something, it's got to be kind of unique. So we're looking at a few unique areas. And one of the unique areas is Route 96 in the area where you saw the aviation area, because you've got a lot of jobs, you've got a lot of businesses. And what we would like to do is see if we can get some funding to perhaps retain an engineer to figure out what can we do? What can we do out there? What can the businesses do long term, and what can be done on the road and some of the other roads other than 96 out there. So that's something that we're just starting to talk to the state and feds about, as well as a couple other target areas. Another one would be the Wiscasset wastewater treatment plant that we all salute when we go north of the Davie Bridge, and downtown Davis Spire, which has some significant things. That's it. It's all on the website.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
Next up is to approve the minutes of the previous meeting, 7/24/2013.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any
Wait a
discussion?
minute, usually that's in fast. Chuck and Steve. Hank,
Chuck and Steve.
that's what I thought.
Yeah. All in favor? Okay. Reports, Jim.
First one is that we've been putting this off, and this one was my fault. A goals and objectives meeting to reschedule that. Additionally, something that we did while I was in at my conference, Main Town City Managers Conference, is we had a guy come in and talk to us about high performance organizations and how to analyze whether you have a high performance organization and steps to get to that. So I put in one of the handouts that they gave us in your packets, and it's kind of interesting, and I just want to see how the selectmen fill it out. So when we get to the moment of having this goals and objectives meeting, if you could look through that and just the best you can without doing a lot of homework, try to answer these questions. I'm just interested to see how our 5 elected officials will fill it out, and I'll surmise the data and give it back to you. And then I'll show you the form that helps us analyze those answers. Pretty interesting stuff, but it's for another day when we're doing goals and objectives. And I thought maybe we could schedule that meeting again. And I didn't want to obviously lump it into today, knowing that we had zoning ordinance, public hearing, and that Bob was going to be here. So I appreciate us being flexible with the schedule. And really, we haven't missed a lot of time. We're talking about July and August, which can be, a little bit of the dry time. We're not really getting a lot of our goals and objectives met during those months. So we still have plenty of time to sit down and discuss what the selectmen want to do. Another thing that I put in I think I put it in the memo, which I don't have in front of me, is that I'd like you guys to think about 3 things that you want to achieve individually in this fiscal year. And then another thing, one thing that you think that we over prioritize, because everybody's going to have a different opinion about what is a priority. Everybody's going to have a different opinion about what is over prioritized. And if you could put that together and get it to me, I will also put together the data and have it ready for discussion for when we have that goals and objectives meeting. Because rather than beat up a discussion and waste time, you'll have it already there and you can come into the meeting pre-prepped. Would you like to schedule that for the next meeting or in advance, or how do you want to go do this?
If you want to do it early.
Yep, that's what I was going to say.
What is it, around 6 o'clock?
So our next meeting is September 11th. You know, if you want to meet at like 6 o'clock, if that works in everybody's schedule. And we'll do goals and objectives. And I think you guys have been with me long enough to know that I take our goals and objectives really seriously, and we try to incorporate them into our work plan and try to incorporate them into our budget plan. So it's something we need before we get to fall and winter. Does that work for everybody? September 11th, 6 p.m.?
Does for me.
Yep.
Okay. The Getting Away Together project that we met and talked about at our last meeting a month ago, where the selectmen created an initiative program with $2,000. I think they're up to about 17,000 out of the 55 that they need to raise. And then Monday night, they went to the Boothbay Harbor Board of Selectmen meeting, and I went with the group. We're trying to do whatever we can because now our money's tied up in it. We want to make sure it's a success. Boothbay Harbor Board of Selectmen decided not to fund the project, but then a local taxpayer donated $2,000 to the harbor to donate to the effort. So that's going forward. You know, we try to get as much exposure to that project because now that we have some money tied in it, we need to see that launched. I know they're selling hats, they're doing fundraisers, and I'll keep you guys kept up as soon as there's new information. The Comprehensive Planning Committee had one meeting while I was not here. I was on vacation, which they worked on refining the vision. I think, Chuck, you've probably seen the refined version electronically now. I think they'll discuss that one more time. They're at the point where they're finishing inventories and getting to the kind of the real meat of the matter on policies and how they want to construct a game plan for future years. The next meeting of the Comprehensive Planning Committee, which would normally be scheduled for September 2nd, collides with Labor Day, so that meeting will be September 3rd, 6 p.m. right here. We've sent out a notice, but if anybody hasn't seen that time and date has changed. Chuck, you're the chairman of the Comp Plan Committee. Anything you want to add?
Just that everybody's working real hard to hopefully have a finished project for next town meeting. Everything's coming together real well.
We still have standing committee vacancies, and we've had advertisements in the paper for quite a few weeks now. I put in your packets the Blake form that we devised. It's really simple, just to get to know somebody that's interested in one of our standing committees. Nowhere does it say that somebody's required to fill this out, but it just helps us figure out who's interested. So now that you guys have a copy of that, if you know anybody that's interested in the standing committee, please let me know, and we'll try to get them before you for appointment. Also, we have 5 candidates for planning board, and I think one person even put a second choice as Board of Appeals. Really great when people list that they're interested just in being on a standing committee, because sometimes one is filled and there are vacancies, and we can always move people around. But the planning board is probably the most pressing vacancy, since you'll find out here in just a moment that we have 3 vacancies on the planning board. We want to fill those as soon as practical, but we don't want to rush it. I've asked the planning board to help me with that process. I think they're going to put together a nominee, or maybe their leadership, to help interview those people and put 3 recommendations before the selectmen. If you guys aren't too eager, we'll allow that process to play out. But the 5 people that have volunteered so far are all really credible, all could make really good planning board members, and we're just going to have to make a hard decision. And hopefully everybody understands that. And I put their applications in your forms, in your packet, so you would know who is interested.
So you're saying that the planning board is going to set up the meetings with all the applicants?
Well, ordinarily, if we had vacancies, I would just interview and make a recommendation to you with you guys knowing everybody that's interested.
Now, ordinarily, this board does the interviews.
Well, we've never had multiple. The last time we had multiple applicants, we actually had everybody in the room and you were able to discuss with them. We're trying to streamline this because we have so many vacancies, trying to come with you. These are all the people, we've kind of talked to them. Do you want to go any further? So, I mean, the Board of Selectmen is more than welcome to sit on the pre-discussion to get there. We're just trying to make it easier for you
But
guys.
I guess I would have to question if we're going to, if we're responsible to appoint to the planning board,
Okay.
wouldn't we want to sit in on the discussions more so than the planning board?
You can. What I'm trying,
But, I mean, I don't even know if I'd say that we could. I mean, that's kind of our responsibility. I mean, that's how I see it. Maybe I'm wrong.
I know in the past, when we've had multiple openings like this, and there's been multiple applicants, the Board of Selectmen, as well as the leadership of the planning board, has conducted the interviews. And then this board with leadership has gotten together for recommendations and moved on from there.
with the shakeup in the planning board, we were trying to be sensitive to the fact that the planning board has a voice in who is recommended. Statutorily, I have the obligation to make recommendations to the selectmen, so I was using that opportunity to have the planning board use my voice to get to you guys.
Statutorily, this board is the one that makes the appointments, so that's why this board has always done the interviews.
Have we? I'm trying to think back from the last time we had an appointment, honestly. I mean, somebody new, I guess that would be Mike.
Yeah, Mike,
I remember that
Dave
discussion.
Stimson, and, Dave Steinmetz, and Martin Page.
Right.
And we did the same process before then. I met and talked with just about everybody that wanted to be on that board, and we had, I don't think we actually did a recommendation because most everybody was in the room that day that you guys made the appointment. Everybody, I think, but Steinmetz, and he was very flexible. He said, any board that you guys want him on.
Right.
So, there is no policy, there's no ordinance. You guys set the rules. We're just trying to make sure that this is as easy as possible. I think it would be hard to get 5 people in here for a selectmen's meeting, but we can if that's what you want to do.
I would almost think that it would make sense. I mean, I don't disagree with the planning board hierarchy, so I don't know how the chairman and vice chairman or whatever, and a couple people from us get together. I think that would be a good mix, personally.
Have they chosen leadership yet?
Yes, matter of fact, vice chairman of the planning board is Fran, and the chairman is now Alan Bellows, which I just heard when I was coming back from vacation, so if I'm wrong, tell me.
You're right.
Hey, I've seen in a lot of towns that, the selectmen will appoint somebody to lead up an interview group, and then you put together that interview group.
Does anybody here have interest in sitting on that?
What, as far as the,
And sitting on the interviewing with the planning board and or Board of Appeals, whatever openings we have?
but you're
I'd
looking
sit on
for
an
an
interview committee.
you're looking for an interview.
Right.
Cool. I think any one of us would probably do so.
Well, when it comes time for knowing the ordinances and stuff, Chuck, I mean, that's my opinion. I don't only speak for myself.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever I've ever had a question about an ordinance, out of the 5 of us, and he's usually the one that I go to because he knows it like the back of his hand.
Yep, fine with me.
So one more,
You want it, Doug?
two of you guys, and then a couple of the planning board.
Doug, Chuck, leadership from the planning board, is that what you guys decided?
How is Alan's schedule?
Alan's on vacation right now.
I mean, but is he normally available during the day, or?
He's not usually available during the day. He works for Computer Sciences Corporation out of doing work for Bath Iron Works.
And if it needs be, we can link somebody in via a phone conference if we have to.
Or if we had to, we could always have Mike or someone sit in his place too, if he didn't feel that he could make it.
Really, we just want the planning board to be engaged in the
I agree.
discussion.
I just think it's important to have somebody, I mean, if Douglas and Chuck come to us and say, these 2 people, these 3 people, or however many you got, are really good people, I mean, they're the ones that appoint, and I take no offense, I take more credibility
Yeah,
than people.
I
You see what I mean?
agree with that, and ultimately, statutorily, this is obviously your decision to make. We look at the current membership of the board, and we try to say of 5 very good candidates, who are the ones that are going to best meld with the existing board, who brings new talent to the board and what it is. I think that's why it might be important to get some input from the planning board.
I agree.
But ultimately, this is your decision.
Looks like you got some good applicants to go over, so that'd be great.
Any of the 5 seem to be good candidates.
There's 1 or 2 more out there that could plausibly apply to, but I think we're going to get the ball rolling.
One of the candidates has been coming to planning board meetings and public hearings and just sitting here quietly taking it all in, and that candidate's very interested.
How many vacancies are there to fill?
On the planning board, there's
Yeah.
3.
There's 3?
Well, there will be 3 after one resignation is accepted here tonight.
Right, okay. And are you going to fill the alternate as well?
Yeah, the admin code isn't very specific on how alternates are named. So recently we've had the planning board self-appointing their officers, self-appointing their alternates.
One of the things that we
code-
talked about was have all 3 openings as alternates to begin with.
Jim, in the
I don't
past,
think you can.
I don't think
if you take a look at
the admin
the
code specifies 4 members and 2 alternates.
5 and 2.
5 and 2. right?
5 members, 2
5 and 2, yeah.
alternates. So one of the folks that get appointed
Yeah,
is going to have to be a full member.
but doesn't it come before the selectmen to go from alternate to a full-time member? I mean, in the past, I remember, basically, it's just a simple, like I don't know if Mike's an alternate or not.
No, Mike's.
But say if he is, and an opening comes up, in the past, it's come before us, just a simple, make a motion to move Mike from alternate to,
Usually an alternate position is used to season a member so that when they become a full member, they're...
Recently, they've also used the alternate position for people that have less time to do some of the full reviews. Much like Nell got her job out of town, she backed off into an alternate position as people became available. And that seems to work really well. And since the admin code isn't clear on how alternates are named, that we've left that device to the planning board to figure out. So you figure out your officers and figure out who your alternates are. And then they're pretty clear in their business meetings in which if somebody is an alternate, then they actually bring them to a full voting member if they need them. So I don't think there's any need to dabble in there unless the selectmen are inclined to.
if they're comfortable with it, I guess.
Any other questions on the standing committee vacancies? We have standing committee vacancies on some of the less sexy positions too, like the Board of Assessment Review has some vacancies. So if anybody has an appetite for serving on a standing committee, please be in touch with me. I think you would find that the Board of Assessment Review is just as rewarding, although it meets much less regularly than some of the other boards, but it's really interesting stuff. In your package, you'll see there is a memo from the Maine Municipal Association Risk Management Services, which the town has received their dividend, which every year since I've been here, we've received a dividend, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and I'm pretty proud of that. So this year we received $3,266 as part of our dividend. How they calculate the dividend is the size of the cost of the coverage that we have, and then our loss history. And in the past 3 years, our loss history has been really good. Matter of fact, the only things hanging on our loss history happened in like my first year here, so they're almost completely clean. So pretty exciting news. It's nice to get paid every once in a while by your insurance company for doing nothing. Department head report. We actually didn't do a department head meeting today. The last couple of days I've been trying to touch base with all our departments, make sure I'm abreast of everything that's going on, coming off of vacation. Public Works is working on Barters Island. They're actually almost ready there. They've done a lot of work pretty impressive work too. I don't know if any of you guys have been out there. Matter of fact, some of the residents that live on that road have been impressed with the road repair that they're doing, because they're doing what they did on Dover, doing what they did on Back River Road, and digging up the bad spots, filling it in, and actually creating a better surface. The business office has obviously been really busy with tax collections, and that's why I gave you that that spreadsheet. Usually I don't spend a lot of time going into the finances if it's all cut and dry. You get the expense revenue report with every single one of your warrants, so you can always look at that, and I try to point out the things that are peculiar or trends that are a little bit odd. And so what I'm showing you is all of the revenues we received in 2013 and 2014 up to this date. So it's the exact same data side by side. And the one thing that I wanted to show you is the real estate tax collection, where we've collected 50.6% of our real estate taxes, or our committed taxes, to this point, with one half due. That doesn't mean that 100% of our taxpayers came in and paid their first half taxes. That means a lot of people came in and paid their first and second half taxes, which is really great for cash flow. But it's an interesting trend. If you look at last year, we were at 46.6%. So even with the tax increase, that's kind of an interesting statistic, interesting fact. We collect at about 97%, which means 3% of our real estate and personal property taxes go through the lien process. We end up collecting them in the long run, but they're not usually recorded in the same fiscal year. But I just thought that was a really interesting fact, and I wanted to show the selectmen how we're collecting. And then also, you see at the bottom of the count, 5,066 transactions in 2 months. Hats off to our clerks in the office. That's a lot of data and record keeping.
I see lien payments have almost doubled as well.
Yeah, well, we have upped our aggressiveness on making sure that past property taxes are paid. As a matter of fact, I think when the auditor comes and reports to you guys, it's one of the things that they'll note. They noted that we've been pretty aggressive with trying to get lien and past due payments in. But it's interesting statistics. Some of it correlates, some of it doesn't. I mean, you could look at motor vehicle excise tax. What does that mean? I don't know. In 2 months, it probably means very little. But we threw it together real quick just to give you guys an idea. The assessment office has been relatively busy working on glitches, minor errors and stuff that happen in the commitment that happen every single year. The beauty of it is there's less this year than there was the year before, and we project less next year, so a little bit of consistency. Code office is really extremely busy. If you entered in at the end of the zoning ordinance public hearing, you saw that the planning board has almost completely wiped the slate of all the changes that they were trying to get done. We'll probably have those ready for a relatively soon town meeting. And that also in code enforcement, they're just completely buried with applications. I think they had 6 planning board applications at the last meeting. I think they have 5 or 6 at this next one. So they're really busy. Lori's out on vacation, but Art's doing a little pinch hitting. And Dan's really busy, and when Lori comes back, that'll be the end of our use with Art, and we'll give him a pretty good send-off. That's all I have on reports.
Aren't you also didn't you get elected on the board for Maine Municipal?
Yeah, didn't I have that on my list? I didn't, did I? Yeah.
I saw it on their website today, that's why I asked.
Yeah, while I was on vacation, Wednesday, went to the Maine Municipal Association Executive Committee orientation, which I can tell you is a really class act. It's pretty easy to sit in the bleachers and criticize the team, but to sit down and get the orientation where you have the department heads from everybody in Maine Municipal sitting there telling you about all their programs, really impressed. And matter of fact, that's only one meeting, and I've already picked up on probably half a dozen things that I'd like to bring back to our organization. implement one way or another to make processes better. I think that's going to be a good experience for the town of Boothbay and for me personally to be on that committee.
Next up, old business, Nicker Kane boat launch, abandoned vessel.
Yeah, I took, like I said in your memo, I took some liberties in putting this under old business. A long time ago, we talked about this. And I just was looking for a place to fit it. So the Sarah C, which was, we talked with the bank, it seems like eons ago, is not tied up anymore. It is now in the mooring area off of Nickercane. Probably no real good answer to this, but the town is curious as to what our role is. We get questions from via email, via phone, all the time about what is the status of that boat. We've talked to Pete Ripley, our harbor master, about what his concerns are, which he has very few. I mean, the boat isn't going anywhere quickly. It's sunk in that area, and it's not impacting any navigable waters. But you can't go over that bridge without it catching your eye and generating a few complaints. So we put this on the agenda to try to figure out what's the board's intention. What do you want to do?
What is our liability, I guess would be my question. Is there one? Is the town liable?
I don't think the town is liable because it's not in navigable waters. I think our biggest concern is the fact that we have an abandoned vessel right there in our little managed harbor area. I think if that boat just sunk there, we would be very interested in trying to help the property owner get rid of it because we don't want a sunk vessel in our managed harbor area. But do boats get abandoned all the time and left for dead? Yeah, they do all the time. So it's not an easy topic. I don't think we have any pending liability.
I can tell you if we have to pull that ashore, stave that up and haul it away, being in the know of what tipping fees cost, it would cost us substantially to get rid of.
So
Does the owner still claim?
the owner still claims it.
Then it's not abandoned.
Yeah, and you're right, it doesn't fit the definition of an abandoned boat, because also in the definition of abandoned boat is it's blocking a waterway. It's not blocking a waterway. So that's kind of a hard case to make, but it doesn't help us answer the questions that we get from complaints and stuff like that.
But my only concern I get is there any fuel in that boat?
I don't believe there is. I mean,
Well, I don't think so, and 500 gallons of fuel sitting in that thing's a big difference without knowing, you know what I mean?
I think they stripped most of the thing out.
they stripped it of everything mechanical. I mean, it's a shell.
Mechanical, I agree, but
Okay.
fuel,
Say
yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
buys that.
That's a
boat
huge-
and
Someone check it out. It's even more than that.
they want to put it down and float it, how can they put it down and float it? They're in riparian rights.
Right. You're absolutely right. The property owner has some riparian rights, and is that in the way? Yeah, absolutely. But that's a civil issue. I mean, that's not necessarily our issue. We're not the property owner of the land. We're not the property owner of the ship. But if we just say, let's see where this goes, which was our intention with the first couple of months, it didn't go anywhere. And it'll only get worse. That boat will just get sunk further in the mud.
My own personal opinion, I apologize, I can barely talk, but I mean, we just had this beautiful bridge built. Not that we did, but I mean, the state of Maine did. And it's all right. Right now, it's kind of a novelty. I drive by there, I look at this ship that's set there. I've seen some kids jump off the bridge and swim out to it and stand on the rails. That's fine. But at some point in time, this thing is going to start dilapidating. It's going to start fumbling, and then it's a hazard. It's not only a hazard to kids jumping off the bridge anymore, but it's a hazard for debris breaking off in it and floating around and getting in people's props and destroying their boats. Not that it's likely, but in the event of a big storm, the thing gets pushed underneath that nice brand new bridge. That ought to be mayhem that I'd love to be a part of. I mean, at some point in time, this is going to become a problem in some sense of the word or another. And do we address it when it's a problem, or do we take care of it before it becomes a problem? I think that's really where we stand right now. And thinking about it, just thinking out loud, we tackle a civil problem with this guy right now, get lawyers involved, cost hundreds if not thousands of dollars to fight this to get him to remove it himself, or we spend thousands of dollars to get rid of it ourselves anyway, and get rid of the problem. I don't know if there's really a right answer, but the discussion needs to be had, and I think it needs to be started sooner than later. I will say, we had a discussion the other day, and that's why I'm kind of voiced in this. I've talked to a lot of people. Most people don't care. I've been all over the island. Anybody that I know that's from that area, I chat with them, I talk with them. They don't seem, it's not a problem. But they all recognize that it will become a problem down the road. So they don't really give me any steering. They don't tell me what they want me to do about it. They don't look at me as a selectman and say, yeah, get rid of it, go hire a crane and pull it out of there. Nothing to that effect. But they all do recognize, right now it's a novelty, it's kind of funny, they look at it, they laugh. But they all recognize it's going to be a problem at some point in time.
And I think it's the consensus of staff is that we don't really care either. We just want to know what to answer the people.
What to do.
And we didn't want to come completely empty-handed. So we had Pete go and talk to Rideout Marine and say, just in the off chance we were going to pull it out, what's that going to cost us? And they took a look at it and say, soft quote of about $2,500. Because we were going with if the selectmen say we get rid of it, Jim, then we would have Rideout pull it out. We'd probably dry it out in the parking lot for a while, and then we'd dispose of it as bulky waste. It's not cheap, but that's the best solution we could come up with without knowing anything.
A special deal, huh?
Now, obviously, if you came up with any direction, the first thing that we'd do is, based on your direction, we'd sit down with Mr. McClellan and say, hey, what can we do?
But first, if it's not abandoned, technically it belongs to Mr. McClellan, so therefore we couldn't touch it.
Well, Pete's already had some conversations with McClellan, and he's a reasonable guy. He's just got limited means like everybody else. So I guess it's probably, based under his power, it's probably not going anywhere anytime soon.
Could we pull it up, let it dry out, and then have a test burn with the fire department?
Yeah, I bet that's not a bad spin-off either.
If there's nothing hazardous in there other than paint.
Just don't do it on the parking lot.
No, exactly.
That's not a bad idea, and we could talk to Mr. McClellan and see if, because obviously we need, there's so many different avenues and they're all convoluted. Let's say we're going to call this an abandoned vessel because we can't work with Mr. McClellan, which I don't see that as happening, but just for this argument's sake, let's say we had to do that. We could do that. We could pull it out. We could dispose of it and then charge back to the property owner. That's a pretty nauseating process. It might be just easier to go to Mr. McClellan and say, hey, this is what we want to do. You okay with that?
My only feeling is, I think that going down the lines of you're thinking $2,500 today is a lot cheaper than waiting until it gets to be a pain and breaks apart, and then it's going to be a lot harder than just grabbing hold of it and hauling it to shore. Right now, it's solid enough that you probably could grab hold of it and bring it to shore.
Yeah.
The town pays for what sort of precedent does that set?
Oh, that's what I'm worried about.
I don't know, that's a good
And you're
question.
right, Frank. I've been thinking about it too. If we do it, everybody else is gonna say, well, I'm just gonna haul it out by the
Where's your
bridge.
risk stuff?
Right.
If it was an abandoned vessel, it'd be much easier to spend town funds to rectify the situation, but it's not an abandoned vessel.
Well, maybe we can negotiate an agreement with Mr. McClellan to pay back the cost. I don't know. Maybe that's a halfway. But I just want to know, do the selectmen want to get rid of this boat, or do we just not
I
want to?
think it's time to have the conversation with Mr. McClellan
I
as,
think-
what are we gonna do with it? Before it becomes a problem, we want to deal with it.
Because Rideout said that they wouldn't need a crane right now. You might need one next year. They said that they would try to float it up and pull it out, which
I don't think you can do it until it's abandoned.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean, he's got to agree that it's.
McClellan can, and if he approves of,
The town can't do anything until it's abandoned.
Yeah, if it's not abandoned, we can't touch it.
we could enter into a mutual agreement.
Well, if you enter into an agreement, but the way it stands right now,
Yeah.
there is no agreement. It is not abandoned, so we can't touch it.
Right, but that's why we're here tonight, is do we start the abandoned ship process? Which I'll tell you, I don't like that process. It's not pleasant for the property owner, it's not pleasant for the town.
Well, he had that avenue open to us once.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, we had that, you know.
Yeah, with the bank involved.
But it was, yeah, but it wasn't in the bottom of the water at the time, you know.
Huh?
It wasn't at the bottom
It
of the
was
water.
laying down.
Yeah, but still, I didn't know what was gonna happen.
Right.
I tried to make the most of it, nobody would second it, and nobody would call it abandoned. The town can call that abandoned, doesn't have to be the owner. So, I mean, you could check in with Sally and find out.
Well, if the town can call it abandoned, I think it's safe to say it's abandoned. Considering it's sitting on the bottom of the sea.
If we did that before, see, the bank, then the state would have stepped in and helped the bank out before, but now we're stuck.
Well, if you just need to know that there's a statute for abandoned vessels, you have to
Yeah,
go.
right.
Does the Coast Guard pay in, because it's in navigation, in the water now, do they play any role of this
No.
whatsoever?
Pete's been in touch with the Coast Guard, with DEP. It's kind of low priority to everybody, but the person that drives by and says that's.
Unless you told them there was 500 gallons of fuel in it.
Right,
When we discussed this last year, I think Pete had a letter from the Coast Guard, didn't he?
yeah. Yeah, they were very concerned with it. And matter of fact, we're going based on a lot of the things that they said last year. It doesn't fit the definition of abandoned vessel. Can we look at it closer?
Just tell the Coast Guard's got 400 gallons of fuel and 200 gallons of hydraulic fluid in there.
I think they've already verified that there aren't any environmental hazards. I think. I
If
mean,
that's the case, then that sets my mind at ease. My only concern is the hydraulic oil, is the diesel fuel. Because that's the last thing, if you've got a boat that's been sitting for 2 years and all of a sudden you're gonna salvage it, do you really think you're gonna try to salvage that 100 gallons of diesel or whatever, that's gonna have water in it?
Yeah,
No, they're gonna try to bring it to my place.
we tried to. The bank was trying to make a case that there were environmental hazards last time,
Yeah.
and I think we had a letter from DEP or
Get us to
Coast
take
Guard
care of it.
verifying that they weren't concerned about any environmental hazards. So I don't know how far that investigation.
But if we're basing our information now on a letter we got last year from the Coast Guard, does it change now that it's no longer tied up to a pier on the side of the banking, now that it's submerged out beside the
Yeah.
bridge?
Yeah.
Well, we can.
The bank's argument was it could come loose and potentially go into that bridge, blah, blah, blah. And of course, they didn't win that argument,
Yeah.
but now it did come loose and it's in the bottom of the water, so.
No, it didn't come loose.
Yeah, I was gonna
Well, I
say, did it
know.
come loose or was it held?
Oh, it would definitely help. It was stripped first, and then it was taken out in the sun.
He had to get it off that by
Yeah.
July 1st.
The bank got a judgment against
Yeah.
him to move that by July 1st, and
So we
noticed
stripped
it was
took it out,
on time by
it
July 1st.
leaked so bad, it's sitting on the bottom. Huh.
Some cops fucking out there.
Well,
I'm sure, by accident.
I'll take the consensus that I've got some direction here, and Pete and I will have a discussion with Mr. McClellan, and we'll try to come up with a better game
See
plan.
if we can come up with something.
I'm glad you guys struggled with it as
For
much as we
everybody.
did, because it's not an easy one.
I don't think there's an easy solution.
Not one that's sensitive, anyway.
New business, planning board resignation.
Was it in your packet?
Yep. An email towards the end, couple pages.
Oh, there we go. So I've attached the email from Gene Fuller, who's resigning from the planning board. We all know Gene and Chuck have been pretty busy the last year or so. And we had a conversation where she feels pretty confident when we're doing the search for planning board applicants right now that will be able to fill that third vacancy. So she's taken that opportunity to duck out now.
I'll make a motion that we accept with regret the resignation of Jeannie Fuller and thank her for her 3 years on the board, on the planning board.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Elmer Fund Scholarship.
So in your packets is a letter, an application from Lucas Layton for the Madeline Ulmer Fund. And just looking for $1,200 to do an exchange program. It fits within the parameters of the Ulmer Fund, and it's actually asking for less than what we've awarded previously to some other similar applicants, so I recommend awarding the $1,200 scholarship.
And this monies will help him go to Germany to further his education through the German program.
And, you know, the ocean classrooms, the exchange programs have seemed to have been the most appealing way to use these scholarship funds, which 3 years ago we were talking about how do we use these funds best. And they seem to be things that would be hard to pay for, but complement a high school education really well.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Motion passes. Boothbay Common Use.
I might be beating a dead horse with this one, but I wanted to make sure that we just went through the motions. That the Masons would like to reintroduce the bean pot supper, which is the bean pot hole is in the common. We've covered it up. It's been grown over for a while. You know, I don't see any reason why we couldn't, but it is use of public lands. So I just wanted to make sure that we talked about it in public and made sure that the Board of Selectmen is okay with that use.
BCA doesn't do the bean suppers anymore?
They don't. They haven't done them since I've been here.
In fact, they've turned over their stuff to the Masons.
Oh,
Right.
good. I'm glad to see someone doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
it seemed to actually have quite a following when they did it.
Yeah.
And they used the shed. You know, they've got the shed over behind the ambulance building is where they always stored their stuff, and I remember seeing them. But I guess now that you mention it, it has been a while.
And if you guys are okay with this use, I'd also like to introduce the idea that we help them uncover that bean pot hole, because we've been spending the last few years trying to make sure it stays covered, so.
I'm just curious, Jim, why bring this one to us when nothing else has been brought to us as far as the use of the common?
I just cover my bases. I just want to be as thorough as possible and make sure that we don't do anything that surprises the Board of Selectmen.
No, it's a traditional use. The BCA did it from their inception pretty much. And I know it's been missed by the community
I agree.
immensely.
I agree.
I've heard the traditions, but it hasn't happened since I've been here, so I'm just being safe. Can we add D on there as well? The whole
How about
business?
D&E?
D&E?
I just want to mention that we attended I forget the abbreviations now.
MTCMA.
Main City, I got it, that's why I've got this open.
Maine Towns.
Maine Town and City and County Management Association. Jim received the Leadership Award up in Sunday River. I forget the date that we went. It was when I was on vacation. But anyways, he received the Leadership Award. It was a very nice dinner, and it's a prestigious award. I've got the thing for you, Ryan. I haven't, and I also have a picture if you'd like it for the register. But I just wanted to make sure that we took the chance to congratulate Jim. He was actually nominated from the Health and Wellness Foundation. Patty Sable nominated for him.
And,
So.
what was it, 9 members of the Boothbay Region Health and Wellness, and 3 members of the Board of Selectmen traveled 200 miles one way to come to our conference, at which I didn't have any clue I was getting the award. I was pretty humbled to see that everybody drove that far just for that award. The Maine Town and City Managers Association hands out 1 leadership award a year. So I'm humbled. I appreciate the nomination. Also appreciate the support. Thank you.
What date was that?
14th.
Was it 2 weeks ago?
It'd been 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
It would have
it was
been
2
the last
weeks ago
select
today.
meeting.
Right, last selectmen's meeting, right?
That's right. We were talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
14.
Because I canceled the selectmen's meeting not knowing that they were all going to be up there. So.
They ushered us in the back door. It was a total surprise. I mean, they gave away 3 awards that day. I believe it was the Leadership Award being one of them.
Yeah.
So they were told 5 minutes before they got the award when they brought him into the room where we were all sitting. So
It's an honor. Thank you.
So next up is, you said you wanted to add a,
Yeah, I'd like to add a discussion about special town meeting. We've had a lot of discussion about the need for a special town meeting, plausibly in November. And then if you've been reading the press, the bond issue is probably going to going to be there for a vote in November. So there will be a need for an election in November, and we've got a bunch of things in the queue for our special town meeting, and that also trigger the petitioned article to go on that warrant as well. So we'll have probably a ton of business to take care of at a November special town meeting. I think did I send you guys the backwards timeline about a month and a half ago? So we're coming up on some deadlines here really soon. Matter of fact, the next Board of Selectmen meeting might be an ideal time to sign a warrant, even though we're not ready to or have finalized language for a warrant. But I didn't want you guys to be surprised when we get to September 11th, where we're suddenly starting to talk about finalizing some of these things. The planning board's worked really hard to get these things in the queue. I know David's very interested in seeing what will happen with this petition article. So we're gonna have to start finalizing some of those
We're
things.
gonna do it on a warrant instead of a special town meeting. I mean, that's how I took it. I mean,
On a ballot.
I mean, on a ballot, I'm sorry.
Right. And I'm not asking you guys to determine how those questions are posed. You'll be able to determine whether you want to do a referendum or an open town meeting soon. And I think we've kind of talked about that loosely, but we want to be prepared for that special town meeting.
So
Right
it's
now-
still called a special town meeting, even if we're doing it by ballot, okay?
Yes.
That's how you was confusing me, that's all.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, so I think we'll take and pull out a lot of the stops for this special town meeting. There's the ability to have a referendum, there's the ability to have an open, there's the ability to have a hybrid. I think we'll probably end up doing the hybrid. I'll probably recommend doing the hybrid because of the nature of the questions that we need to ask.
But we've talked about that in the past too, and I think at least the majority of us here have said, if we're gonna have a special town meeting, if you have it open at all you're gonna basically get is special interest.
Special interest.
So I know we talked about putting it on the ballot.
Yes.
And I think if we're gonna do some of it on the ballot, we should do all of it on the ballot.
Okay, that's why we're having this discussion now, is I want to, we may come to you the September 11th with like a 90% warrant ready to start looking at it, because a lot of this is going to come together real fast. So I wanted to get your thoughts. So even all of the zoning ordinance changes, which may be many questions you'd like in a referendum as well.
We have 32 changes at this point in time that are, I guess, before Sally for review and verbiage and whatnot. Of those, probably 9 or 10 of them are of a major note, and the balance of them are changes that are required because the verbiage or something is wrong, or the definition needs to be indented or outdented. A word is wrong in it, may instead of shall, and things like this. But some of the major ones are obviously a response on the planning board response on the Simpson warrant, a total rewrite of the sign ordinance, which Mike Tomaselli has been working on for a long time and did a great job on. The changes in the C3 district for the Country Club Road area, a lot of changes like that. So there's probably 9 or 10 major ones, and the balance of them are less major and could probably be not necessarily on a ballot, but
Well, there's some generic ones that we can bunch all together in one
I don't know.
question, and then the controversial ones, separate those out.
And maybe they could. I don't know. I guess that might be up to Sally as the way it'd be.
I was just
be
gonna say,
worded,
if she
but
could
has
figure a way
all
to
of them
write
at
it
this
up.
point in time.
Yeah,
I
some
think-
of them are sporadically placed in the admin, in the zoning ordinance, so it might be hard to generate a question that says, do you want to incorporate all of these minor corrections?
The heck of it is, it's silly to have some written and then have a special town meeting that night, you know what I mean? I think that it makes more sense you're gonna capture more of an audience. I mean, that was the argument we've used with David all along, is you gotta keep that special interest groups out, no matter what side it's on, it's just not fair.
No,
And that written ballot, you're getting the true people. You're gonna get a lot more people during the day than you are at a special town meeting at night. That's a fact.
Okay.
I mean, we see that with an annual town meeting now, we don't get anybody there.
You saw that when you bought that property down the road too.
I think that dog's already gone
Well, it'll
dead.
make a difference.
So,
So
Acceptable.
I will,
Yeah.
as soon as we have a draft to review, that'll go out electronically for you guys to look at. But we're really aggressively trying to put this together,
So
especially
we got
knowing
plenty
our
of time
timelines.
to tweak it, yeah.
Just for clarity, I mean, if we have 5 questions on a referendum, or if we have 30 questions on a referendum, I mean, cost-wise,
No, well, it depends. It depends if we bump this into multiple pages. But then the cost is negligible. We're gonna be using our new voting machine at this election.
right?
And the state is saying that they want as much advance notice of our ballot as possible, which might be a little hard because what we're putting together is a very complicated ballot. So we'll work it out. And if we get to the point where we're like, hey, we're at D-Day and we don't have a ballot ready, then we'll discuss then.
If we have a local ballot and a state ballot, why does the state even need to know what's on our local ballot?
Well, the state technically owns these new election machines, and so they coordinate the printing of all the ballots to get the best price. So we have to go through the state just to print our ballot.
So it doesn't have anything to do with the contents on the ballot?
No,
No.
just how many questions? and how
no,
many
just so the
ballots.
state gets the best price for their election.
They probably get it for you.
Yeah, and they probably ramp it up for us.
Sure.
And once again, this is a new process, so we're trying to come up to speed with this new process, knowing that our timetable is shrinking and that we have really complicated things to vote on. Very complicated, as if you were here before the meeting. So I wanted to brief you guys the things that will be on, that the planning board is putting on. Obviously, David Stimson has his petition article that has to be there. The planning board has put together an either or type of question. So there's going to be his and the other one.
But didn't I sat through the meeting, I came at 6. But did I understand correctly that you do support the one that the planning board put forth?
No. Well, there was some discussion about that at a workshop earlier, and David had an early preview of the planning board recommendation, and at that point in time sent a letter to the CEO saying that he cannot support that, so.
I thought the way I understood it tonight, you did support it, Dave.
I didn't say that I didn't support the review. All I said was that I thought it would be better to keep the definitions very clear, so that boat building, which is to me obviously a maritime activity, should be in the definitions as such. And that if you want to control the scale and size of operations in residential zones, you put that in the use table so that you're defining it as what it is. Boat building is a maritime activity, but then you're limiting it in the residential area. And so I think for myself, either one will suit the purposes. I'm thinking about this for the good of other townspeople who might have a different situation than I do.
Will David's ordinance change that he's putting forth, will that appear verbatim on the warrant? And then in addition to that, will the planning board's, whatever they recommend, just be a recommendation?
No, it would have to be his, because it's a citizens initiative, correct me if I'm wrong, yay and nay, and then theirs would be a competing article as well. I mean, am I wrong?
But the vote
So either vote for one or the other?
Yeah, the vote would be would almost have to be one or the other. Both of them could not pass.
Right.
Then there'd be a conflict. You know,
It'd be
the
conflicting.
scenario would be one of the two could pass, or none of them could pass, and then we revert back to the existing ordinance. But
But I think his comes first because it's a citizens initiative. Am I
yeah,
wrong in
but
that?
by the same token, you'd have to
And yours,
list David's, list ours, and some kind of a comment would have to be in there. Vote for one or the other, and at that same time, planning board and selectmen's recommendations would go at the bottom of each one of those.
You can list the questions in whatever order the selectmen want to, but I would recommend put the petition article right there first, because it was there first anyway.
Yeah.
And what's the final date that everything needs to be finalized?
We've been working backwards, and I'm sorry, I'm looking over your shoulder. we're hoping to have something for the September 11th meeting. That's why I added this to the agenda item, because there is the distinct possibility that we might have to have an emergency meeting if we're not prepared for that 11th to get something done. The drop date is, I have to count back, 45 days from November 5th, so it ends up being like September 19th.
Your note says September 20th is the date that the selectmen must sign the order for referendum.
So there's the distinct possibility that if we're not ready, we might have to have a special selectmen meeting just to do the pop and circumstance of signing a warrant.
We have a second public hearing scheduled for next Wednesday, but we probably wouldn't want to hold it unless we have information back from Sally Gagnon at this point in time. So that they're scheduled meetings basically right down the road every Wednesday at this point in time to advertise them. And if we don't have information back from Sally, we'll cancel the September 4th meeting and go on to the Wednesday after that, hoping that we get information back from Sally.
Yeah, the questions are finalized. They're just being legally reviewed, which most of that work has been done. We're just not comfortable putting them down on paper format until that's complete.
Fran, your meetings are all at 6, right?
The public hearings are going to be all at 6, yes.
And we may suggest, as we get close to the deadline and we start realizing how much time we have to work with, we may fulfill our obligation in the zoning ordinance to do public hearings, but we may have one after the warrant signed, which is legal, but then it allows more opportunity if people felt the time crunch to make their comment about the question. So we may ask the selectmen to, maybe in conjunction with one of their meetings before the vote, to do another public hearing to solicit any concerns that are out there that we haven't heard. The other things that are on, that the planning board's been working on is a slight change to the zoning map. This would expand C3 district and expand a little bit of the village district, just pushing borders a little bit. Warehousing in some of the commercial districts. The sign portion of the zoning ordinance is completely revamped. I suggest people come in and look at the example that we'll have at the town office. If you want copies, just let us know, we'll make copies. They're changing the definitions of structures to exclude driveways in some instances.
Eliminate driveways and parking from the calculation.
I think everybody here is familiar with the fact that that's been problematic. There's some industrial park zoning ordinance changes, mostly to do with infrastructure and when you have to tie into sewer when it's available. Obviously, sewer's not available. This is for that someday situation. And then a lot of administrative corrections.
Non-conforming uses also where there's the 1 year period where if you've stopped business and grandpa dies after a year, we're proposing that gets extended to a 2-year period with a 1-year extension for a total of 3 years on that. But, the intent is that eventually all non-conforming uses will eventually work their way out of existence. But there's more of an opportunity. We saw that a good use of the extensions with Bo Brewer in the T&D variety. He came in well before Grandpa died and asked for a 1-year extension, and then right after that, he sold the property, and now there's a good going business there right now. And so that was good. And so this will give more business people more of an opportunity to protect their interest while they might want to do something else with their business, but still work towards these non-conforming uses going away.
What was non-conforming about the store?
It was reaching a point where it had been out of business for a year.
Right,
So,
but it would still be an allowed use up there.
Yeah, but that said, the section of it is non-conforming uses that
The traditional use that was there, we had to go way back.
Resumption prohibited is actually that section of it where it talks about non-conformance, and then 37.6.1 says resumption of water or structure which is in a non-conforming use is discontinued for a period exceeding 1 year we're making that 2 years.
You've lost me, Fran, because you were talking about non-conforming. That's why I asked what was non-conforming about the store. If that's an allowed use up there, it was never non-conforming to begin with, even if it ceased
My
business.
understanding was that it was a non-conforming use.
The use on the store, I'm forgetting the name of it before it was T&D.
AG.
I can't remember what the exact use is out of my memory, but there was an application, it listed the use. That use is not allowed in that zone anymore. I can't remember if it wasn't a store, or, it didn't call it a store, it called it some other use.
Yeah.
So we, at a minimum, would have had to go back to the planning board, at a
It
minimum.
was a fuel distance.
I was gonna
They
say,
added
probably
to
the
it.
fuel because of the
It
water.
wasn't fuel either, because,
Really?
yeah,
I
it was
can't remember what it
peculiar,
was.
the use that was listed was peculiar. So that at a very minimum, they would have had to come back before the planning board.
Interesting.
So I put that, I wanted to add that to the agenda just so that we're not in the dark, and that when we do this September 11th or whenever, that we've already had the pre-discussion.
Public comment.
I've got a question about something that's in the package, and that's part of the memo that you had to staff, and you've got a break waiver form in here.
Yes.
Did you run that through Pat Dunn at Jensen Baird? The
No.
reason I ask is, where I work, we're told that waivers are illegal when it comes to the 30-minute state lunches. So I just want to make sure that the town is covered if we're going to have our employees sign a waiver to waive their lunches.
First of all, the town would never recommend that somebody else, that somebody breaks their waiver. That's if an employee wants to waive their.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'd like to have you check with Pat Dunn on that, make sure that's legal.
We've already ran it through an attorney. As a matter of fact, we did it at the attorney's advice. We got that attorney advice free, but we can pay Pat Dunn to look at that if we'd like.
Who was the attorney?
Winger, we went to a seminar, went to a Fair Labor Standards Act seminar just recently, in which they advised us to use the break waiver form. So.
Unfortunately, we don't pay for their advice. We do pay Jensen Baird for theirs. I'd feel more comfortable if we had this run through legal.
Would we be different in some respect from public? I wouldn't
State
think when
law
it
is
comes
state
down to them,
law.
right? I wouldn't think that we'd
Yeah,
be
but
different.
you're a private employer and we're a public employer, and it's a little
That
bit.
was the
State
main
law or
municipal-
state law, I'd still like to see it checked out.
Was it?
What's that?
That was a Maine municipal sponsored workshop.
Yeah, it was
That they
amazing.
told us that.
Sherry was in the same Fair Labor Standards.
If
training
it comes
session.
back and our attorney says that, yes, our employees can sign a waiver and waive their lunch and work straight through, I'm fine.
I'd say you're liable if you're not having them fill out a break waiver form if they don't get a lunch period. Now, all of our employees get a lunch period, and matter of fact, we would never tell them to work through lunch, but we have a couple of employees that request to not take a lunch break to affect their work schedule. So that's why we came up with the break waiver form, so that we're not held liable for them not taking a lunch.
And I understand that when I was an hourly employee, I never wanted to take a lunch either, but I'd just like to see this checked out.
Can I get the board to make a motion on that one, just to
Spend the money.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we contact Pat Dunn at Jensen Baird and check into the legality of the town of Boothbay break waiver form.
Motion's been made. Second.
Sorry, Chuck.
It's okay.
I can't say anything.
It's okay.
I don't think it's worth spending the money.
We went to the Fair Labor Standards training just because we were concerned about some of our liability in other areas, and that's where we came up with this. So,
Motion dies.
As long as we're covered, that's all I care
I
about.
agree with that.
I do understand, but I mean, it seems like two of the people sitting at that table both all heard the same thing, so I just feel comfortable.
No, but if you ask 3 different lawyers, you get 3 different opinions.
But that's just it too. You ask Jensen Baird, they're gonna tell you something else, and then what are you gonna do, go find a tiebreaker?
I just feel comfortable with the lawyers that we pay.
Yeah.
Next up is public comment. Brian?
I have a question on the common use, Boothbay common use. Does the town charge for the use of that common for like BCA or any sort of, does you have to be a nonprofit organization or if somebody wants to have an event there? Does the town have any fees at all? Licensing fees, permit fees?
I think we just have the town use application fee, which the board sets annually.
Which is how much?
I can't remember off the top of my head. It's nominal.
Used
And
to
then-
be $100.
Under $100, $100
And-
or whatever.
Yeah, and then if you're private, then we want insurance that names the town additionally insured.
Say a group of, somebody organizes a group of businesses that want to have some sort of event or festival. And, yeah, nothing in mind, this is just a general question.
Sure.
Trying to compare what they do in the harbor. Is there any sort of, permitting, just that one event fee?
Just the one event fee.
Nominal event fee, and then it's,
Yeah. They have to fill out an application. I would generally approve it or disapprove of it. I've never not approved one, but I guess if it was a peculiar use request, then I'd bring it back to the board and say.
vendors fees, temporary vendors fees, or?
We would want to, if you're a vendor, we would want to know that you have a mobile vending license, which
Okay.
we also do. So we generally know who has a mobile vending license
Okay.
because we already go through that.
Yeah.
I mean, the craft fairs, we don't, I mean,
The
They
craft
come in
fairs in
and-
the past, it used to be a rollover. The $100 was always to cover any.
And clean up with the crew that we do.
right.
Yeah.
But I don't think the fee would be unreasonable when you don't maintain the grass and all that kind of stuff.
But for like for the farmer's market, for instance, they have one person comes out and
Right.
takes out the application and fills it out for the entire year, and we consider that just one application. They map out what they think the vendors are gonna be. So usually those are our main customers on that
Okay.
application is the farmer's market, the craft fair, those
That's
things.
great, that's good, it's very fair.
And now
We've
being,
got
now being
some people that
full
come back here, I feel like the Rotary.
Yeah.
I know the music festival that they had, they're looking to make that a yearly thing.
Right,
The biggest thing is usually just scheduling.
What?
Scheduling,
right,
because everybody wants to use the common.
yeah,
that's a good thing.
Yeah.
thank you.
Anything else?
Could I just make
Sure.
a quick comment about the warrant article issue? I would like to feel that I could support the planning board's competing issue, but I'd also like to put forth the idea that they don't necessarily have to put forth a competing issue, that they could put forth, and they could put forth a warrant that would give the needed protection in the community without negating what I've done with the warrant article. In other words, I believe that, some people are concerned that maybe the one that I put forth would allow a shipyard to spring up in a residential community, which I'm not sure if that's true or not, but if people are worried about protection, I would like to see the planning board put forward an article that would put the controls in the use table category rather than in changing the definitions. And if they could do that, I think everybody would feel that they come out ahead.
I can only speak for myself. I personally can't support what you brought forth to us for the exact reason that you just stated. It allows boat building everywhere. And when I say boat building, I got nothing against someone building a wooden boat. I really don't. I think what you do normally up there is great. What I do have a problem with is that would open up the door. I'm not saying that a sample shipyard or a Washburn and Doughty would plan on moving next door to me or anybody else, but that does open that door so they could potentially do that. I have a real hard time with that.
I don't think you understood what I said, though, that they...
According to the way you wrote,
Right.
it would allow it, yes. It would allow it in all residential districts.
But all they need to do, the planning board needs to do, is make another change in the use table that would put a condition in where in residential areas that it would have to meet terms of a home occupation.
That's almost like spot zoning, you can't do
It
that.
would, well, you can do that, and they do it in every other area of the use tables. You will see that they'll have, okay, this is allowed in this area, but it needs planning board approval in this area, or they'll have a C3, which means conditional, and then they'll have a little footnote that says, and it specifies, and all you have to say is that it's conditional use in the residential area, and that then it will have to meet the terms of a home occupation, which means you can't have more than 3 employees or subcontractors out of the family, and it means that you have to meet all the other limitations of a home occupation. So what this would do is it would allow the definition of boat building to remain the way it is in the state's version and the way it is in our comprehensive plan, and it would mean that boat building is defined as a maritime activity, which it is. If we get everything right. Right now, every proposal I've heard of is just a patch, it's a Band-Aid, it's not fixing the real issue.
Well, I can't personally, and I don't think any of us can. I mean, these guys work with the ordinances every day. I mean, I have to trust if they recommend something, we have to trust that they've done their homework and they have reasons for it. I mean, that's what the public meetings are for, and I mean, I was half listening to them, and I apologize to Fran when you was explaining your reasoning for doing what you was doing, and you and Jeannie and Mike, but I don't claim to understand the ordinances the way these guys do. They're into them every single day, we're not. So I mean, for us to say to them after they've put their work into it, we don't agree with this, I mean, I think that it would have to be pretty blatant in order for us to say that. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, I can't speak for the rest of you folks.
What we've done with this, and a piece of it kind of covers what David's talking about, our proposal is to change the definition of commercial fishing activities and maritime activities to keep it pretty much the way it is, but to say unless the work meets the definition of a home occupation, so that you're still looking at a big shipyard coming in or a big boat building operation coming in, it's manufacturing. If you're looking at a family operation with a few employees coming in, it comes into the definition of a home occupation. I think what David would prefer to do, and the planning board did not want to do it, is in maritime activities, include verbiage about boat building. And we had a lot of discussion on that and decided that would not be the direction that we wanted to go with. Ultimately, it's going to be a voter's decision as to what they do, and we in the town will live with whatever the vote comes out as. And my take it come out as a vote, David's warrant would be the winner, or possibly our changes would be the winner, or none of them could be the winner, and it reverts back to the existing ordinance. But whatever it's going to be, it's going to be.
I would like to state something, even though I'm not going to be able to state it very clearly. That's probably the most reasonable sitting in front of this table that I've heard so far. Actually, you probably almost could have sold me on that 6 months ago, a year ago, when we were having this discussion. It's very clear, it's well defined. I kind of like it, but at this point in time, we have the one that's been, the petition that's in front of us is written by you, and I can't, in peace of mind, stand behind that petition the way it's written currently. Now you're right, they can change definitions to maybe make it so it would work, but unfortunately, I think a little bit more thought should have been put into your petition before it was signed, and maybe we would have had a better product all the way around. It's unfortunate, because really it's a very logical, what you're saying is pretty clear and pretty well defined. I'm with Steve, though. I gotta kind of revert back to my planning board because they deal with this stuff every day, not me. But it is very clear, and it is well thought through. I don't know if it's defined enough, and I don't know if it's, meets the criteria they're looking for. But it's definitely the most reasonable I've heard you ever sit in front of here, and you could have almost sold me a year ago.
My thought is that I think it's a mistake to make your controls in the definition. the controls should be in use tables. And my definition is just, all of this is defining boat building as a maritime activity, which it is. And then, and that is how it's in the state version, and it's how it was in our version before the change was made in 2007. And it seems to me that there's still time, if the planning board wanted to put that change in the use table, there's still time to have both of them, and the control will be there. There won't be any shipyards springing up in residential zones. And it would also control boat repair. Right now, according to the law, even though I can't build a 10-foot skiff, I could repair a 60-foot steel tugboat. And you can't control boat repair as manufacturing because nobody's going to believe that boat repair is manufacturing.
Have you gone to any, other than tonight, before, the public hearing, have you gone to any of the planning board?
Oh, yes.
Have you?
I have. I've been to their workshops and all that.
David, if I can speak, I'll speak for the planning board and administration, is that we discussed, at least administration discussed, and I think the planning board touched on this at one point in time, of doing exactly what you said and change the use table. And the original discussion, they thought that it would be seen as undermining your petition. Because you're saying change this, and then we're going to say, okay, we're going to change the other things that affect that definition.
But I have nothing against putting controls on scale of operations in the residential zone, and I would welcome any, anything that would.
The reason why I state that is just that was an idea that I think was tossed around a little bit. And I think everybody was trying to be respectful of the fact that you had a petition out there to change the law, and nobody in an administration or public official wants to undermine that process. And then the planning board came up with an alternate route that probably does about the same thing in a different fashion. And honestly, to boil it down, becomes a little bit of semantics, because in another year or two, we may be doing a major rewrite based on the comp plan. So I think a fix was what the planning board wanted, and to make everybody happy. And I think everybody is now, after a long debate, to the point of how do we get this to a mutual goal.
Don't you think it would be safer for those residents who wish to be protected to allow my warrant article to stand and to put all the energy into the protective part of it? In that way, we're sure that everything goes through in a way that is fair to everybody.
But the problem is if we allowed your warrant article to stand and let that go through, if we supported that, between then and when the comprehensive plan looks at everything and changes it, say 2 years from now, like Jim said, in that 2-year span, you've just opened up the general residential district to anything they want to do for the next 2 years. You can't put restrictions on your warrant. We can't change a citizen's initiative.
But I'm suggesting that the planning board needs to act quickly and put the controls in the use table on the same warrant, on the same town meeting.
So his warning gets passed and our protections go in at the same moment.
Exactly.
Again, I'm going to refer to the planning board. That's their area of expertise.
And the definitions, as we've changed them, conditions do apply still. So we do have conditions there. They're the right to put conditions on under anything. And when we talk about boat building, David can apply for boat. If the planning board conditions apply, David can apply for home occupation to build boats under commercial fishing activities. And I think I'm hearing David say he'd rather have the ability to apply for boat building under maritime activities. Well, he can still apply for boat building under commercial fishing activities under our warrant as a home occupation with conditions that would apply. That would be the conditions for a home occupation. It'd be noise, it'd be the type of building, it would be the number of employees. There's a lot of the similar conditions that David is looking at right now under his boat repair issue. There could be, an enclosed building or not, or a buffer zone if it's an open area. So there's a lot of things there, and I think some of it is semantics, and it's probably reaching a point where it's time for the voters to make a decision.
let's say voters voted for what the planning board put forth. Let's say that goes into local law. Would David be able to resume building the steel schooner under that change?
He can apply.
He can apply, and depending on conditions that might be put on it, it's possible. I don't know if David would ever want to get into building a steel boat ever again.
That job's gone.
But, it's possible, and it depends on what it is he's asking for. Is he asking to build a 106-foot schooner in his backyard that's going to have an adverse effect on the neighborhood, that's going to have an adverse effect on materials being...
So for every new boat, would he have to apply?
No, not necessarily, no.
He'd have to spell out the parameters of his business in his application.
Right, okay.
And again, when somebody fills out the parameters of what they want to do, and if their business model changes, you can always come back with a request for a change in that model. We've seen this with the brewery and other businesses coming in. Okay, I had this, now I want to do this. And now there's change 3. We've looked at Washburn and Gardy with change 3 to what they're doing and building a new building. So, business changes, and you can't say what's going to happen 5 or 10 years from now.
Yes, Dave.
So I would like to ask Fran, what happens under that scenario if I want to repair and build boats? Do I have to go and apply for boat repair under maritime activities and then boat construction under home occupation?
I would say that you apply for both under one permit, and that gives you both. That's just saying I want to do this and I want to do this.
It seems
And
messy.
they're both home occupations.
And it doesn't, the boat repair, it would not be regulated as far as what we'd be allowed to do. We wouldn't be regulated as far as number of employees or anything like that.
You would be as a if you applied for it as a home occupation, because both of them say home occupation under these changes. And if you apply for both of them under home occupation, the conditions might be written for each one separately.
No, under the change it says boat building, but it does not say, it doesn't have boat repair under there as a home occupation. It says construction of boats is a home occupation.
I actually
You
think...
can't put repair in there because you can't have repair defined as manufacturing. And so it's a very messy way to do it, I think. It's not clean.
Well,
We've already got
the planning board doesn't...
Maritime activities, we have conditions already placed on for that part of the business over the years.
Right,
That's already done.
For myself, I'm just talking for the good of the whole town and for the future and future planning boards that might have other applicants. So it just makes sense to me to get the definitions straight and to control the uses.
Under our proposed ordinances for the benefit of the selectmen, under commercial fishing activities, we talk about boat building, and we say that as a principal occupation, it's manufacturing and prohibited, unless it conforms to the standard of a home occupation. So if it conforms to the standard of a home occupation, that covers boat building under commercial fishing activities. When we look at maritime activities, we talk about repair of boats. And again, the same statement, as a principal occupation, it could be a manufacturing thing unless it conforms to the standards of a home occupation. So under each of those definitions, if somebody says that we want to do commercial fishing activities and maritime activities in a business, and it's a home occupation, the family members and no more than 3 employees, plus the standard conditions of a home occupation, that would be a valid business to do. And it would look at what is that occupation, what district it's in, how does it conform with the rest of the neighborhood, are there adverse effects on the business? But under the 2 definitions, a home occupation can do boat building and boat repair. It's just that one covers boat building, one covers boat repair. The previous ordinance, as they stand right now, it was the same thing. One covered boat building, one covered boat repair. Rather than trying to get into trying to change the definitions of manufacturing and to make it too convoluted, we said, okay, we'll keep it, we'll make changes to definitions, but we'll look at home occupation, which is what somebody in a general residential area may want to do. If you're looking at something that's going to grow bigger, then sooner or later a business needs to get out of that and go into an industrial or a commercial area. That kind of stands to reason, or a maritime location. But when you look at it as a home occupation, it's probably very suitable for a general residential district.
David?
I would like to ask Fran to read exactly what the proposed change is, just only for the maritime activities section. You have it there. I believe that it does not change how boat repair would be seen by the planning board. And I don't believe that it would put any constraints on boat repair. It would mean that somebody could have a large project going on in the residential zone.
No, the definition of maritime activities, as we define it, is the repair, loading, unloading of boats, chandlery, and other activities designed and intended to facilitate maritime trade. Only individuals and businesses providing these services to others for profit should be subject to the provisions of this ordinance. The construction of boat is a principal occupation. That's what the definition says right now. We expanded to say, unless it conforms to the standards of a home occupation.
Right, so that means that the construction of boats is manufacturing, but it does nowhere say...
No, hold on. Under the definition of maritime activities, it covers boat repair. Under the definition of commercial fishing activities, it covers boat building.
All I'm saying is that in your maritime activities definition, the proposed one...
It doesn't cover boat building, I agree, it never did.
Your proposed one does not cover boat repair.
It does, it says the
No,
repair...
It says construction of boats.
It says, no, it says the repair, loading, and unloading of boats.
But it doesn't say that that's manufacturing.
It does say, it does say that if...
I don't agree with you.
Okay, well, that's fine, but it's the way the definition read originally. The only thing we added to it was unless it meets the definition of a home occupation. So, yeah, it's a little bit convoluted in that we didn't make major changes to both. We didn't try to change the use tables, but we did say that under the two definitions, that if you want to do boat building as a home occupation, you're looking at commercial fishing activities. If you want to do boat repair, it's maritime activities. If you want to do both, then you apply to do both. And that way, both are covered. And it's not two separate applications. I'm applying for commercial fishing activities and maritime activities, and my home occupation meets these two definitions.
Can I suggest that we've segued into a planning board workshop discussion? Not a board
Yes, I
select-
agree.
That makes sense.
Any more public comment?
And then you have my recommendations
Yes.
for an executive session.
First, we'll entertain a motion to review the warrants and sign them.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? So now, I'll make the motion to go into executive session, and you'll have to give me the title, because I don't know what it is.
Pursuant 1 MRSA 4056C for economic development.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?